Hi, just looking at the Manchester bombings. I've just read this, which is a comment from John Duran on YouTube, and he has explained that Manchester attack as a MI6 blowback. Bomber's father was MI6 agent, asked twice to assassinate Gaddafi, and this is the article, which I'll leave you the link, but you will have to click on Google Translate because it's written in French. But basically, yes, the alleged bomber's dad did have connections to MI6, and he was employed to participate in what turned out to be two failed attempts to assassinate Colonel Gaddafi. And in 1992, Ramadan Abedi was returned by the MI6, British MI6, and participated in a crime conspiracy to assassinate Muammar Gaddafi. The operation having been stolen, he was exfiltrated by MI6 and transferred to the United Kingdom, where he obtained political asylum. He settled in 1999 in Whalley Range, south of Manchester, where the small Libyan community of the United Kingdom resides. In 1994, Ramadan Abedi returned to Libya on behalf of MI6. At the end of 1995, he took part in the creation of the Islamic Fighting Group in Libya, a local Al-Qaeda brand, alongside Abdel Kahim Belhaj. The GLCL was then instructed by the MI6 to assassinate Muammar Gaddafi against £100,000 sterling. This operation, which also failed, provoked lively debates in the services of His Majesty, including the resignation of our friend David Shayler. Many former members of the ILFG have also lived at Whalley Range, including Abedi's friend Abd al-Basser Azzouz. In 2009, he joined Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and became a close friend of his leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri. In 2011, he participated on the ground in the operation of NATO against Libya. So, you know, I mean, this just follows on from my previous video, which I know people are saying that the Manchester attack was a hoax. I'm really not prepared to go into whether or not it was a hoax and looking at pictures, blah blah blah, because at the end of the day, it was a false flag event, whether it was a hoax or not. You know, because just because something's a false flag event, it does not mean that people were not injured, that the events didn't actually happen. It's just that we know that they're orchestrated by members of our own intelligence, by our own government, by the people who run our banks, that this is a Zionist operation that we're now living in, and we need to be aware and wake up. And all this discourse about whether or not the victims were real, whether or not the families are really grieving, it is beside the point of it, isn't it? Because it doesn't matter whether it was a staged event or whether it was a real event. Either way, it was orchestrated by the kind of people who employed his father. And then later on we find, the father's son. And apparently his mother's a nuclear physicist. We find the father's son is involved in bombing Manchester Arena. And we know that then all these events that have been happening worldwide, in Britain, Europe, America, Africa, you name it, we've had these so-called ISIS attacks. And we know that it is part of a managed terrorism, controlled opposition. That's what is going on in the world today. It's all controlled opposition. it's all on behalf of a Zionist agenda. And when I say Zionist, you know, let's remember the Queen is a Zionist, our government is a Zionist, David Cameron stated, I am a Zionist. Most of Parliament MPs are embroiled with the Zionists. The Zionists are controlling Israel. They established Israel, even against true Jews' wishes. And, you know, we need to be very careful not to turn this into an anti-Jewish debate, because this isn't about Judaism, it isn't about Christianity, it isn't about Islam, it's about a collective, a cabal, who come together under the usurpation of all faiths, you know, whether it be Judaism turned into Zionism, Christianity turned into, you know, Protestant and Catholicism, Islam turned into Sunni and Shiism, you know, all the isms. Basically what you've got is a group of people, a group of like minds. It doesn't matter which country they come from, what faith they are, how rich or educated they are. Are you willing to sacrifice a child? Yes, you're in our club. Okay? If you're not willing to do that, then, you know, you are never going to reach the top echelons of society in this world. And we know that a particular psychology is being favoured in this world. It's being nurtured. It is a psychosexual disease. It's been going on for centuries. It does involve cannibalism. It does involve abusing and murdering and trafficking children. It does include the very highest, so-called highest echelons of global society, the global elite, and they are controlling everything. And, you know, so like I say, I find it tiresome, all the videos and things focusing on, you know, what's real, who really died, who didn't really die in the attack, how they've been using pictures of a girl who was murdered by a boyfriend, you know, which sadly, again, is an all too common event in Britain, with 2 to 3 women per week being murdered by a partner or ex-partner. You know, how much does that amount to in a year? And very little's being done about that. Few questions are asked about what kind of society is it that raises the type of male consciousness that commonly murders their partner or ex-partner. And if they're not murdering them, they're raping and battering them, which is, you know, is many, many more times than 2 to 3 a week. We're talking about hundreds of women every week. And, you know, it's got so bad that there's even men suffering the same battery and intimidation from their female partners. You know, this isn't today, it isn't just females. There are a percentage of males that suffer the same, because this psychology, it isn't exclusive to one gender or another. You know, more and more women are involved in abusing children as well. So this isn't just something that's anti-male. We're dealing with anti-human. Okay, and recently I did a Facebook note explaining about how it is that, you know, we live in this anti-human society. And, you know, the cornerstone is compassion, and the cornerstone of compassion is the one that the builders, the Freemasons, have refused. They've refused to incorporate compassion. They've replaced it with duty. They've replaced satisfaction with pride. You know, these are the kind of things, the kind of consciousness that the people of Britain especially are living under. I've grown up in Britain. The people are very entrenched in cognitive dissonance. They're very judgmental. They are very easily led by TV, whatever's on TV. Very easily led by the BBC. They're very starstruck. You know, they're very drunk, a lot of them, and if they're not drunk, they're on either pharmaceutical drugs or so-called illegal drugs. And then we've got a police service, and well, every local authority, every authority in Britain has got its top pedo sadists that are being protected, and who do have an easy supply of children. We know for a fact that hundreds of children every year that are in care because they've been trafficked into Britain suddenly go missing, never to be found again. The media are telling us that they've all ran off back to the captors, which is really incredible and unbelievable, actually. We find out that besides the trafficked children, there's 2,000 children a year on average go missing off social work records. Nobody knows what's happened to those children. 180 plus per year that go missing off social work records are babies under the age of 1. So obviously they didn't abscond. So at the moment, the way that it stands in Britain, a child, once that child is taken into care, that child can go missing, never be found again, and nobody's really going to ask any questions about it. That's the situation. A child can go to the police and give a crime report about sexual abuse against themselves. Medical evidence can confirm that. Not one person will be arrested. The child will be removed from the parents and never return to the parents again. You know, and these are the kind of things that are going on in our own country, and meanwhile, you know, as if we didn't have enough to deal with that, they're also training and funding and organising these terrorist attacks, whether they're fake or real. It makes no difference. The important thing is that they are orchestrated and they are controlled, and they are to serve a specific purpose, which is to keep the anti-Muslim agenda high in the public consciousness, to feed into this so-called alt-right, which, you know, they focus on antiquated Islam and then try to claim that all Muslims follow this antiquated version of Islam, which is actually a pack of lies. And a lot of the Muslims that are involved in that, in the stricter versions of Islam, the antiquated versions, are only there by peer pressure, by the pressure of their communities and key powerful figures in their communities. And that's part of the reason why Manchester took great steps in the 1960s to break apart what had become peaceful multicultural communities in Moss Side especially, where you had every nationality of people, including white British people, all getting along together very fine and well, until they decided to knock down all the houses in Manchester as slum housing, bearing in mind that similar housing in other cities now sells for up to £150,000. But they knocked it all down and then used that opportunity to separate the people. So all the Asian people were sent to Wally Range, all the black people were sent to Hume, and all the white people were sent to a brand new council housing estate that had been built in Wilmslow. And, you know, I know this for a fact because my auntie was married to a Jamaican and her children were mixed race, and she was not going to be allowed to move onto this new estate in Wilmslow, and it was only because all the family were living there that eventually she was allowed to move onto the estate. So we know that there's a reason why they've done this, and it's because then the communities, you know, if you've got a whole area that's just full of Asian people, those Asian people will be kept in check by key figures within their own communities. And I've had to help rescue people from those communities, mostly women, an elderly lady who lived in fear of people from her own community of Pakistan, and it's the same everywhere. And the black communities were largely infiltrated by various authorities, and the black people used mainly for pushing drugs and other and also prostitution. These were the divisions that were imposed on us, and so the divisions continue, and now they want to create, you know, hatred in Britain against Islam. But really what they want to do is to feed British people with a false interpretation of Islam, to promote that as Islam, in order to distract us from the true Islam, which actually upholds human rights and upholds women's rights and children's rights, and has got absolutely nothing really in common with the antiquated form of Islam, because true Islam always follows new knowledge, and that's the whole point of Islam, is that it's a faith based on facts and knowledge. Okay, so you know, I will leave you the link to this, but in my previous video I already showed key terrorists, known terrorists, who we know were and are funded and protected by MI6 and MI5. And, you know, here again is yet more evidence that we've got this bomber. Again, he's got connections to MI6, MI5. Now, what are the odds of that? What are the odds of it? And it is important for British people to wake up, because all this is a distraction. We've got another general election coming up, with, you know, as I call her, Theresa May, and they are hell-bent on scrapping our human rights, which is an extremely serious issue. It is a serious terrorist threat against the people of Britain to be facing the prospect of having our human rights scrapped. This is the story of the century, okay, because it was only after World War II, after the great sacrifice of the British people, that we finally got our human rights, after centuries of oppression and denial of our rights. Finally we were given those human rights. We still have not received the full of them. You know, according to our human rights, there should be not one person in Britain who's homeless. There should not be one person in Britain who is denied social security if there are no jobs. You see, these are our human rights, and the fact that British people aren't getting them is because nobody's standing up for them. The fact that the government can point to refugees and say, well, they only help refugees, is because the government has to satisfy refugees' human rights, because there are international watchdogs and bodies making sure, and legal teams making sure, that refugees get their human rights. When it comes to the people of Britain, go to a solicitor and complain about your human rights. See if you can find a solicitor who will represent you in court. You won't find one. If you're a drug addict, if you're you know, addicted to heroin and you're in prison and you've been denied methadone, you'll get plenty of solicitors who will represent you on the grounds of an abuse of your human rights, and you'll probably get compensation of around £3,000. Now, I'm not knocking the fact that, you know, people who are addicted to heroin need methadone in prison, but what I am explaining here is that we've got a bias situation, haven't we? Whereas it's okay, yeah, there's plenty of solicitors and lawyers who will stand up for a person who's been denied methadone in prison, but we, as an abuse of their human rights. But try as you might, you're not going to find one to represent you when you've been denied your income because you're on benefits, because you're sick or disabled and you've been made ill. You know, you are not going to get a solicitor who's going to stand up, take a case to court on grounds of an abuse of your human rights. You're not going to get a solicitor stand up and defend you on grounds of abuse of your human rights that you've been made homeless, you see. So these are you know, dignity. The ATOS investigations disrespected people's dignity, and again, you could I tried to get a solicitor to represent people on grounds of human rights abuses about, you know, loss of dignity, loss of social security, loss of the home, and not one single solicitor would take up the case. So, you know, we are living in very, very dangerous times, and as I say, the people who are responsible for this rise of so-called ISIS, Al-Qaeda, you name it, you know, whatever they call themselves, though apparently Al-Qaeda don't support ISIS, and ISIS are actually known as Daesh, you know, who are what? Murderers, basically. Sadists, psychopaths, and murderers. A collective of people that enjoy hurting people. That consciousness is real. It's a real aspect of humanity. We're supposed to be vigilant for them and make sure that they're incarcerated and getting therapy. But unfortunately in this world, instead, they're, you know, singled out, given special training, and armed or put in positions of power, because that's what the kind of consciousness, beast consciousness, that the powers of this world depend on in order to keep control of the masses through fear. And as my videos explain to people, that you've got absolutely nothing to be afraid of. We need to connect to our universal being. We need to understand, accept the science, accept the proof of quantum physics. We are eternal light beings, and death is not the end. And so we need to lose this fear of death. We need to start loving our lives more and putting more into life, more truth, more reality into life. And, you know, then we shall all be reborn into a better world. If we refuse to use our lives towards improving human consciousness, sharing truth, sharing honesty, being ourselves, then, you know, the afterlife isn't going to be very pleasant. And so this is again very, very, very serious news. I think we need to bring a case against our government. We do. There needs to be a case brought against them for treason. For treason. 7/7 is the start of it in Britain, but also there's 9/11, where we've got an entire parliament who's prepared to ignore the laws of physics in order to accept and promote the American establishment's wild conspiracy theory, of which the facts absolutely and utterly deny. We know it was an organised event, we know it was orchestrated, we know it was pre-planned, we know that the media and the establishment have covered up and lied, and therefore they're now complicit in a terrorist attack. And no matter what anybody says about 9/11, yes, it was a false flag event, but real people were injured, real people did die, and this is what I mean. Whether an event is a hoax, a staged hoax, or whether it's a staged false flag event, it makes no difference. They're orchestrated by people who are using terror to manipulate public opinion, public consciousness, to instill fear, and also thereby give themselves more powers to deny our rights and to give themselves rights to go on bombing missions in the Middle East, which is being completely destroyed, and the people, innocent people and children, being murdered by a pack of lies. So, as I say, the only way forward really is for British people of all faiths and ethnicities to get together and to stand up for our children's rights. The EU Child Protection Directives are what we need, okay? And until we get those, there's going to be no change. Until we stand up for our children's rights, there's going to be no change. Until we start accepting the truth of our light-being bodies, there's going to be no change, okay? And that is the fact of it. We need to start getting real, and the first step of getting real is getting real to yourself as a human being with a light-being body, you know. And it is no difference to people of, you know, of history who suddenly, you know, discovered what the heart is for, or how a baby is grown in the womb, or what the brain actually does, or discovering our DNA, and all these things which we didn't know about, and then we've had to accept, and now everybody commonly accepts that yes, we do have DNA, even though you can't see it, okay? Just by looking at yourself, you need to go through special tests, blah blah blah, but yes, you do have DNA. And now the same scientific testing has proven that yes, we do have quantum light being energy in every cell of our bodies. It's what constructs our thoughts, and that energy does not perish with the physical body. This is a very, very important step in reaching higher consciousness and learning to understand that we do need to change, okay? And I've done quite a lengthy series of videos called Catching Up on the Drift, which I suggest people have a listen to. It puts forward a proposal of changes, of how we can facilitate change, how we can live more ecologically friendly, more cooperatively with each other, and we do need to understand that this far right and so-called right philosophy and politics are actually an indicator of psychological imbalance. Nobody has a right to say that some people can be denied healthcare, some people can be denied meaningful employment, some people can be denied an education, you know, because you're not talking about some people, you're talking about a majority of people who are being denied those things by a minority of people who consider themselves superior. And this needs to end, because under Jar law there is no superior person. Jar law serves everybody equally from the first to the last, and nobody is above Jar law. And unfortunately we're living in a world where apparently the bankers are. Now it's time to end that. And as I say, you're not going to end it until you stand up for your children's rights, because the first thing that we need to make very, very clear is I'm very sorry, New World Order, but our children are not going to pay your criminal debt.